why opposition essentially can't use debate is because no one in this room really bought the distinction between our model of commercialized relationship services and existing psychiatrists in therapy. You pay for it, they listen to you, it's kind of personalized. We think that's completely dismissive. The brilliant prompt I gave to you earlier this round, when I talked about the visceral experience of being able to sensorily experience these particular things, given your deeply seated need for a particular outcome. And we think they also can't really assume that just because I long for these kinds of things, that it becomes bad for me. Because if I save my money, for example, and actually desire to go to these particular services, they can't really say why it's unfair and pragmatically harmful for me to do so. Three capital sins they didn't survey to ultimately lose. Firstly was on explaining this entire false dichotomy of funded existing medical services and commercialization of relationship services. This debate was primarily set up in Japan, where Nick told you about in multiple POIs how they're a developed country, they have a lot of money, and ultimately, if there were no problem, then why does this gap still exist? Evident in people killing themselves for the slightest reasons, especially given the very toxic workplace I take to you from the very start of this round. That very much implies how people still have an underserved need given a specific target market which exists, which people like entrepreneurs like Kate and I can capitalize on and ultimately build a business from. We think that you have to be able to talk about this on two levels. Firstly, on the level of how Nathan's extension ultimately remains unresponded to, especially given his analysis of how these services also become cheaper, given the creation of an entirely new industry with a solid demand for it, given how we're talking about their entirely different target segment. You have to be able to look at commercialization as a business, a nuanced burden we took on and successfully fulfilled. Two things, right? Firstly, we think that people are also able to make these informed decisions and they're aware of any pragmatic harms which may ensue from this. And even if these pragmatic harms ensue, we also think that these pragmatic harms can also happen on your model, but at least in our model, we have a worldview of so many alternatives. So we think that if these things don't work for you, then on our end, you can do it. It's a mix and match kind of thing, not an either or false dichotomy. And second, no one is essentially forced to take it. So if you think and you talk to diagnose, it's not cool for you, then don't do it. Secondly, you really can't force individuals to fit a particular mold determined by the state or any licensed practitioner. That was the battle cry of Therese in her speech, which crystallizes the debate on our side of the house. Because in our world, we acknowledge the spectrum of needs people have, given that the quote-unquote root of the problem is ultimately super case-to-case. It's not a monolithic issue in which you can assume apples to apples or just oranges. Everyone has ultimately a specific reason why they're anxious, why they're depressed, why they want to kill themselves. Lastly, on the buzzer beater, do analysis from the opposition rep, which ought to have been distributed better to its partners, right? He talked about this very convenient characterization to limit their model and their world to work for people who are actually strong enough and ready to be able to get over the death of their children or their father. And they fail again to engage in the worldview of how other people might want to be able to go through this step-by-step process, right? Because in our world, we see a step-by-step process where if it works for you, then good, you can take these alternative forms of treatment. If not, you can continuously do it and try to subscribe to it. So they ultimately fail at that. So ultimately, on our side of the house, we were able to tell you in principle why people have the decision, how people ought to be the ones responsible for making decisions which affect their own lives, and how people are ultimately going to be more responsible when they're the ones who are able to dictate that despite any consequences. We are very proud to take round 5.